The great Nigel Farage, he is mixing up UK politics and he's got an absolute in when it comes to Donald Trump. And I'm also always celebrating, Nigel, the great speech the day after you got elected when people were interrupting. Boring! Boring. I love it. I want that every day, every chance. I want that as a ringtone available for the Reform Party. I love that. I really do. So find any chance to do it, we're in. So I love what you wrote in the Telegraph in the UK today, which was the UK is able to take certain positions when it comes to stepping up maybe in relation to Ukraine because it's not part of the EU. Brexit has given the UK the chance to be the alternative global leader here. I couldn't agree more, and this is an absolute vindication of what you fought for, so that when moments like this happen, the UK is not wed to Europe.
Yeah, absolutely. But what an irony that it's Sir Keir Starmer, not just the great Remainer, but the man who was campaigning for a second referendum because he didn't like the result. So the irony that he is now the beneficiary of this is not lost on me. But yeah, I mean, it was very interesting. On Saturday night, ahead of the big summit that was held here in London on Sunday, Number 10 themselves briefed that the UK now has a unique position compared to the rest of Europe. So, yeah, we can talk to America, we can talk to Ukraine, we can talk to the European Union. As EU members, we would have been expected to speak with one voice. So, yeah, it is an absolute vindication of Brexit, and I couldn't be happier, really.
So let's get to where the UK is going to land here. I mean, Starmer seems like he wants to be the person at the heart of a coalition of the willing, but of course all of that in terms of resisting what's happening with Russia is going to cost an awful lot of money. It's what, 300 plus billion US dollars. So if that's all going to stop, then you're going to have to come up with a version of that, in pounds and then obviously in the euros and all the rest of it. The appetite of the British public, let's see. Obviously, everyone wants to fight for a democracy, but is Starmer of the belief that the majority are willing to pay the price for where he is trying to position himself?
Well, right now, about two-thirds of the British public are strongly supportive of Ukrainian sovereignty against the Putin incursion. About a third just say, forget it, it's nothing to do with us. So that's roughly where we are on the numbers. But of the two-thirds, when you actually ask them, do you want to send the entire British army to Ukraine? And do you want to turn all of our munitions making over to Ukraine? Then you start to get different answers. And I think the absolute truth of where we are with this is that if the Americans were to walk away completely, that Starmer might find that the coalition of the willing doesn't have that many members. So what is ultimately absolutely crucial here is that Zelensky and Trump come to some sort of accommodation, and I think the US minerals deal is a very, very clever step in the right direction. And if we do that, then we can find the right level of security guarantees, then this horrible war can come to an end. And remember, and I know Australia's a long way away, but bear this in mind, folks, 1 million battle casualties in 3 years. This is of an extraordinary, epic scale, and it needs to end as quickly as possible.
You're a member of the European Parliament for a long time. Does the EU have the money to actually offer the same support that the US did? Now, obviously, the US is in $30-something trillion worth of debt, so it's credit card on top of credit card. The way that you know European politics to work, would they be willing to put their own countries into significant deficits or rack up that credit card? Yes, for the sovereignty of a European nation, not a member of the EU, not a member of NATO, but do they have the money to do it?
No, and I think what's happened over the course of the last couple of weeks is because of the British position, you've seen Macron standing up and articulating a very French position as opposed to an EU position, and this Ursula von der Leyen, who is the boss of the European Commission, frankly, is a bit of a laughingstock on the world stage. When you poll Europeans about this issue, they say, yes, we must increase defence spending. What they mean is, you must increase defence spending. We don't want to do it. And so I don't think the genuine will and resolve is there. Oh, countries like Poland, of course, will step up to the plate. But I suspect many, many others simply won't do it. And I think you're really seeing, an absolute test of the credibility of the European Union. And frankly, the truth is, it's not really a player in this.
Yeah, so let's get back to the meeting, and everyone's had their say, but you're a man who knows Trump so well. You know what was happening behind the scenes. You know what has been leading up to this for years, let alone months, and then the minutes that took place. What did you think of that exchange, and was there an opportunity for Zelensky in that moment? Like when Trump's sort of up and ready, was there a chance for him to diffuse in that moment?
Look, I think the problem for Zelensky was that psychologically, going into a meeting, signing the minerals deal, which would be the first step towards a genuine peace process, I think Zelensky's psychological problem is that would mean giving up on Crimea. It would mean accepting a large chunk of territory wasn't going to come back to Ukraine. And what's clear to me is he went into the White House, he wasn't ready for that meeting. And so in some ways, the bust-up perhaps was a good thing. A good thing in the sense that now both sides part, there'll be more angry words. But, you know, at some point, Zelensky's got to realise that without America, he's not going to have a secure future. So I think the row was always going to happen, basically. I would say this, though. You know, if I was briefing someone who was going to meet President Trump, I would say this to them. He's old school. He's old-fashioned. He looks how you're dressed. He looks to see your shoes are clean. You know, there is an old-world element to Trump about how you appear, how you look, and whether you're showing him respect. And I know that this has been Zelensky's calling card, this sort of battle dress that he wears, but it was definitely not the right thing to do on that day. Well,
but also, I mean, it's... You know, I get it, what he's trying to show here, which is I'm coming from the battlefront. You know, I'm not going to look like every other world leader because I'm the one under pressure. But, I mean, it's pretty obvious, right? If your major security benefactor, the one paying for it all, tells you to turn up in a suit, turn up in a suit, all right? Yeah. But he chose not to. And I think, again, maybe there was that want to bust things up because the assumption was that the global pressure would somehow bring Trump back to the table. But, again... You know, Trump's not going to come back to the table because the front page of a paper in Spain is yelling at him.
No, he's not. And it's also worth remembering that the Republican movement in America, is not particularly supportive of all the money and the efforts that have been going into Ukraine. Actually, in many ways, Trump is a bigger internationalist than many of his own party and his own voters. And maybe we ought to bear that in mind.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Just before we go, how are things with reform at the moment? Latest polls, again, showing that you're in an incredibly strong position. But I notice a few things about tactical voting, meaning that people may well end up trying to block you by voting for parties they wouldn't agree with. This is all part of the argument about first past the post versus preferences and the rest of it. Do you think that people are being a bit smarty pants of a way to block you guys at the moment?
Well, we'll find out. On May the 1st, we have English local county elections. They've cancelled one or two of them, sadly, but 15 million people get the chance to vote on May the 1st. It'll be the first real acid test. You know, is reform at the top or near the top of the polls? Is it virtual or is it real? And I am going to be travelling the length and breadth of these islands over the course of the next month or so to try and make it real. So ask me on May the 2nd and I'll tell you how we're doing.
What's your favourite garbage food that you get to eat when you're out and about and campaigning?
Oh, fish and chips. Fish and chips out of the bag with lashings of salt and vinegar. Lovely.
I love it. Thank you, mate. We'll see you again next week. Thank you. Nigel Farage, never boring. Now, you know, of course, he is here each and every Tuesday night.